Welcome to the 5-Minute Murder podcast from 5minutemurder.com, where each week we take a look at a murder, a murderer, an assassination, or a serial killer in about 5 minutes. If you enjoy the show and would like to support us, why not consider buying us a coffee? Head on over to 5minutemurder.com/coffee to see how. This is episode 29, The Assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. The assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. on the 4th of April 1968 marked a tragic and defining moment in American history. A leader of the civil rights movement, King was a figure of hope, peace, and justice, advocating for racial equality through non-violent means. His untimely death at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee, sent shockwaves across the world, sparking outrage, grief, and furthering the struggle for the ideals he championed. The circumstances surrounding his assassination, the investigation that followed, and its lasting impact continue to be analysed and debated to this day. Martin Luther King Jr. had become the face of the civil rights movement throughout the 1950s and 1960s. From leading the Montgomery bus boycott in 1955 to delivering his iconic "I Have a Dream" speech in Washington, D.C. in 1963, he played a pivotal role in challenging racial segregation and discrimination in the United States. His commitment to peaceful protest, inspired by Mahatma Gandhi, set him apart in an era marked by violent racial confrontations. However, his activism also made him a target for those who opposed change, including white supremacists and elements within the government. By 1968, King had shifted much of his focus towards economic justice, addressing the poverty that disproportionately affected African Americans. He organised the Poor People's Campaign, advocating for better wages, housing, and employment opportunities. His trip to Memphis in early April was in support of striking sanitation workers who were protesting unsafe working conditions and unfair wages. The city had seen growing tensions as the largely African American workforce demanded dignity and recognition for their labour. King's presence was meant to lend national attention to their cause, and despite growing threats to his life, he remained resolute in his mission. On the evening of the 3rd of April, King delivered what would become his final speech at the Mason Temple. In what seemed an eerie foreshadowing of his fate, he spoke of the threats against him and his acceptance of whatever lay ahead. "I've been to the mountaintop," he declared, referencing Moses looking over the Promised Land. He expressed no fear of death, stating that he had seen the future of racial justice and was at peace with his role in the struggle. Those present were deeply moved, unaware that within 24 hours their leader would be dead. On the 4th of April, King was staying at the Lorraine Motel, a frequent stop for civil rights leaders. At approximately 6:01 p.m., as he stood on the balcony outside room 306, he was struck by a single bullet that tore through his jaw and spine. He collapsed immediately. Chaos erupted as his aides rushed to his side, desperately trying to help him. Among them was Ralph Abernathy, his close friend and fellow activist, who cradled King as he fought for life. He was rushed to St. Joseph's Hospital, but despite the doctor's best efforts, he was pronounced dead at 7:05 p.m. The world had lost one of its greatest advocates for peace and equality. News of King's assassination spread rapidly, and the reaction was immediate. Across the United States, grief turned to outrage, and riots broke out in more than 100 cities. Buildings were set ablaze, looting erupted, and the National Guard was deployed to restore order. The death of the civil rights leader exposed the deep racial tensions that still plagued the nation. Many mourned his passing as the loss of a unifying voice, while others saw it as a final proof that justice for African Americans could not be won through peaceful means alone. The search for King's assassin began almost immediately. Investigators quickly identified James Earl Ray, a career criminal and fugitive, as the prime suspect. Ray had escaped from a Missouri prison in 1967 and was on the run at the time of the shooting. His fingerprints were found on a rifle, and binoculars left near a boarding house across from the Lorraine Motel. The FBI launched one of the largest manhunts in American history, and Ray was eventually captured 2 months later at Heathrow Airport in London. He had been attempting to flee to Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, which was then controlled by a white minority government. Extradited to the United States, Ray initially confessed to the murder, avoiding a trial by pleading guilty, but later recanted, claiming he had been set up. Ray's conviction did little to quell the speculation surrounding King's assassination. Many doubted that he had acted alone, and theories of government involvement or a wider conspiracy emerged. King had been under heavy surveillance by the FBI, and its director, J. Edgar Hoover, had viewed him as a threat to national security. The FBI's infamous COINTELPRO program had attempted to discredit King and his movement, leading some to question whether his assassination had been part of a larger plan to silence him. The King family themselves expressed doubts over the official narrative, believing that the full truth had never been uncovered. Despite these lingering doubts, Ray remained the only person ever convicted of King's assassination. He spent the rest of his life in prison, making multiple appeals for a new trial, all of which were denied. He died in 1998, still maintaining his innocence. The assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. had profound consequences. It accelerated the civil rights movement's progress, prompting President Lyndon B. Johnson to push forward the Fair Housing Act of 1968, a key piece of legislation aimed at ending racial discrimination in housing. However, King's absence left a leadership void within the movement. While figures like Jesse Jackson and John Lewis carried on his work, the unity and moral authority he had provided were irreplaceable. His legacy remains unparalleled. Streets, schools and landmarks have been named in his honour, and his birthday is now observed as a national holiday in the United States. His message of non-violence and justice continues to inspire movements for equality worldwide. Yet, his assassination serves as a reminder of the resistance to progress and the sacrifices made in the fight for human rights. More than half a century later, the questions surrounding his death remain. But what is undeniable is the impact Martin Luther King Jr. had on the world. His vision of a just and equal society has endured beyond his lifetime, proving that even in the face of hatred and violence, the dream he spoke of is still very much alive. I hope you enjoyed that episode of the 5-Minute Murder podcast from 5minutemurder.com. If you did, why not leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you would like to support us more directly, please consider buying us a coffee. Head on over to 5minutemurder.com/coffee to see how. Also, please check out our other 5-Minute podcasts. You will find them all at 5minuteproductions.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.